Hello and welcome back to Paddock and Track, the show where we bring you news on and off the track. I'm Max, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Amaan.
What's up, guys?
And today we are back again. It has been a while, but we are back with the British Grand Prix. So, I think we'll just jump right in as we usually do. So looking at qualifying, Mercedes' performance, I think we've seen a big increase, especially from Canada and on.
Yes.
The Mercedes performance has been really, really good, and I don't know why exactly. Clearly, they've brought some upgrades that have really helped them out. Because, Russell and Hamilton were P1 and P2. So very good start for two British drivers at the British Grand Prix, but also two Mercedes drivers that kind of lacked the performance they would have been hoping for, especially at the beginning of the season.
Definitely.
And then Norris in P3, another good qualifying from him, but not exactly where he'd hoped to be. Of course, he'd want to be up at the front. It's easier to fight for the win, of course.
Yes.
But still a very respectable qualifying. And then Verstappen in P4, which is sort of interesting.
Interesting, I do gotta say, because we've seen that. As you said, Mercedes has also brought the upgrades, and so McLaren's not the only threat for Red Bull now.
Yeah.
We see Mercedes is now in the mix, and let's see how that does play out for Verstappen, as we see P4 for him.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the best of starts either.
Yeah.
Of course, he'd like to be starting further up the grid, and we know that, of course, last year and earlier in the season, even Red Bull was kind of more dominant.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's starting to fall away from them. They've always had Perez kind of far down as they did this race, but for slightly different reasons. But still, to see this this little bit of a fall from Red Bull is definitely not what they'd be looking for.
And we definitely will see a change, maybe possibly, in the
Yeah,
constructors
so.
if Perez keeps up what is going on.
Yeah.
With the
And then Piastri in P5. So the top five is pretty much what we would expect, I think, at this point in the season. The two Mercedes, the two McLarens, and then Verstappen, because, Perez was starting from the pit lane. He changed his power unit, so
we can't blame him on that one.
Yeah, and then Gasly also starting from the back of the grid because he had to take additional power unit elements. So essentially he had a lot of grid pace penalties that just pushed him to the back.
Which didn't end up mattering.
Yeah, no. As he didn't start the race even.
He had a gearbox issue, I believe.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And during the
formation
lap, he went in and never came out.
Yeah, he went into the pits, and then that was sadly the end of the race for Pierre Gasly.
Second time this season, that same thing happened.
Which
so
is kind of
yeah,
sad, especially after he's recently re-signed with Alpine for 2025.
Yes.
That's definitely not what he would hope for. But looking at the rest of the grid, a Q3 appearance for Alex Albon, so maybe Williams has had some upgrades come in.
I mean, yes, we do see Logan Sargent P12 as well, so maybe just a strong outshowing for Williams as well.
Yeah, and this is a race that Logan Sargent typically does well in his F2 days.
Definitely.
He did win here in F2, and for Williams, of course, it's an important race as it is their home race for the team. And of course, again, like I said, it is sort of a special race for Sargent too, as he's won here. But yeah, so pretty good showing for Williams in terms of qualifying. And then they'll hope to continue to improve because this isn't exactly probably where they want to be. They want to be higher up.
Definitely not. I mean, as you know, Williams is definitely trying to look for the better you know, new signing for Williams. We can get on about that later.
Yeah. And then Leclerc knocked out in Q2 in P11. That's kind of sad for Leclerc.
For the Ferraris too. I mean, we saw Sainz P7 too.
Yeah.
So strong start to the season for Ferrari, but they seem to have tapered off and maybe a little have fallen too.
Yeah, and especially considering Sainz is P7 behind a Haas,
yes,
who has the same engine as Ferrari is they supply the engine for Haas.
Yes.
So that's it really shows something about Ferrari because they're similar in performance in terms of the engine.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to what they do with the car. And so it's kind of sad for Ferrari that they're being outperformed by a Haas.
I mean, yeah, well, also another team to mention, Aston. We see Stroll P8, Alonso P10, also getting out-qualified by that Haas. So we also see that Aston Martin, as you've seen before, a strong team, but as of now, not really.
Well, and also what's interesting is the Astons seem to be the worst of the Mercedes supplied teams.
Yeah.
Except for, I suppose, Williams most of the time. But I mean, Albon did out-qualify Alonso, so it's sort of, they're pretty even, I would say. But the Mercedes and the McLarens are like miles ahead of where the Aston and the Williams are this season. So clearly it's not the Mercedes engine because it seems to be working pretty well.
Yeah.
So that really means that the car development is just not there for those two teams.
Nope.
And part of that probably is they don't have the same resources that a team like Mercedes or a team like McLaren has. But still, I think they really need to step it up. And if they want to be able to compete like Aston Martin did last year, or for Williams, just competing for points, I think they really need to step it up and they really need to get some upgrades going.
Definitely. And then as we see, as we go down, we see the V car P13 and Tsunoda and P15 and Ricciardo.
Yeah. Another not great showing for them. Like we said with the with other cars, kind of a good start to the season, like Ferrari, but then sort of falling off now.
Yeah.
But their race pace seemed to be better, which we'll get into. But yeah, some things, they'll want to improve their qualifying pace as well.
And then we see Stake just dead in the water as always. Joe P14, Bottas P16, and in the race it was just even worse. Like, it wasn't great at all.
So hopping into the race, there was like a threat of rain essentially for the entire race because there was a cloud like real close to the track when the race started. We never really knew when it was gonna come, and when it did, it really mixed things up for everybody.
It did.
That really, I think, played a big factor in the race and the outcome of the race.
And not just that, the way it also tested the drivers about how to also adapt. And we saw the McLarens early on, they were the ones who adapted to the rain quickest, and we saw Norris and Piastri be 1-2 quickly off the bat, and we see George Russell drop off a bit to P4. And which is interesting to see because the McLarens have been really good at managing their tires in different situations, so it's nice to see them continue doing that during this race.
Yeah. And to scoot back a little bit real quick, Norris and Piastri were both able to pass Verstappen. Verstappen had passed Norris at the start, and then Norris and Piastri were able to get him back. It kind of showed the performance of the McLaren against the Red Bull, because in a straight line, it like wasn't even a competition. Norris passing Max Verstappen there, it looked so easy for Norris. And then getting into the rain, it looked even easier for McLaren. The two Mercedes were really, really struggling. Part of that is when you're leading, you're kind of the first one to see the corners, see how wet they are, so you don't really know. But the McLarens they seemed quick even in this, like when it started raining, everybody was still on dry tires. They were quick. They were able to get, like you said, 1-2. Very fast. Both cars were like kind of flying, honestly. And then look, another Ferrari strategy call. It was very questionable because they just called Leclerc in for inters, and it was so early into the rain that it was very strange.
And we see that's like the Canada thing too. I mean, it was like the opposite in Canada. So everyone was on inners, and they pitted Leclerc for slicks, which I guess I could see where they're coming from, but the rain was still coming down, so I don't know what that strategy was, and that just ruined his race.
Yeah, and then here, like you said, kind of the opposite, right? They just the rain wasn't coming down hard enough yet, and they were losing so much time that really they called him in way too early. And then everybody then began to pit onto inters, but McLaren, they didn't do it very well. What they should have had, what I think probably they should have done is had Piastri slow down back off of Lando, because they were real close, like within a second of each other. They should have had Piastri just slow down a little bit. There is like rules, like you can't hinder the race of the person behind, but he could have slowed down enough that he wouldn't have hindered Hamilton behind, and he would have allowed the McLarens to double stack, and then it really would have helped Piastri, because after the pit he came out like P6, and it kind of affected his race.
And Norris had to stay out an extra.
Piastri stayed out.
Oh, Piastri stayed out.
But Norris pitted, so it helped Norris get onto those inters earlier, but it really did not help Piastri, who then was kind of pushed down the order a bit. And then we see the inters were degrading real fast because the rain. It was very weird how the rain was coming down.
The rain, it was coming out in like bits at a time. Like it started then stopped, so the track was like warming up.
Yeah, and
at a faster rate than it was like the rain was coming down.
Yeah.
So and we saw clearly you could see the rubber coming off the inners, which clearly tire degradation was really big on those inners.
Yeah, so it really was bad for them. The drivers wanted to get off of those. It was hard because, you know, it was still a little wet. It was like real close on the margin of do you pit or do you stay out?
Yeah.
I think the better decision was in the end pitting that we saw a little later, like towards lap 34. So we ended up seeing about 15 or so laps of rain. But I think pitting then and getting on to dry tires was definitely the good idea because the track had dried up enough that I think you could manage it through the wet parts and be totally fine. However, somebody who was not totally fine was George Russell.
That was very unfortunate. So he had to retire the car because of, was it his water?
He was losing water pressure, which is really unfortunate because at that point there's nothing you can do. It's something with the car, you know. Yeah. It's really heartbreaking for them because you just feel like so helpless. I think,
especially how strong the Mercedes were during this race.
Yeah.
Too. So really unfortunate going from pole to not even finishing the race.
Yeah, definitely a shame for him. And then basically right after he had retired, the rain pretty much had stopped. Now, the way McLaren decided to switch up their pit stops this time, I'm not sure if it was because they pitted Lando first when they're going on to inters, so they were like, let's pit Piastri first.
Yeah.
So they pit Piastri first. He put on mediums. They had a new set of mediums. It worked pretty well for him. He came up to fourth, finished fourth. That's not the worst for him.
Yeah.
But Norris pits from, I believe he was pitting from second. Or no, he pit from first because he stayed out that extra lap.
Yeah.
He pit from first, and then he decided he wanted to pit for softs. And then he ended up having a slow stop. It was like 4.5 seconds. Put him behind Hamilton, and then he lost so much time because the tires were degrading so fast.
Yeah, so really poor decision by Norris on that part. I mean, it would have been really well for him to go on the mediums because then Verstappen did eventually catch him on those hard tires and the softs just degraded too quickly for Norris to actually keep P2. So he did drop to P3 in the end with Verstappen getting P2.
Yeah, because the problem is that we've seen that the McLaren tire degradation usually is pretty good.
Yeah.
But I think Lando was pushing those tires so hard to catch Hamilton and try to win that they degraded so fast that by the time he would have even, like, he needed way more life in those tires, and then Verstappen had already caught him.
Yeah.
And so it kind of ruined his chances at the win. I think it would have been a better option for him to just go on to the mediums.
Which I've been seeing a lot lately, that Norris has been trying to get his second win ever since Miami. He's been, like, gunning for it. But he's made these, like, crucial mistakes that I wouldn't say, I mean, some of them, I think there are mostly silly mistakes that he could, like, prevent.
Yeah, I think he's kind of reckless, sort of.
He is kind of reckless now. I mean, we've seen before that he's been happy with P2, but he seems to not be happy with P2 anymore. So he's been trying to catch Hamilton for P1, but he just lost P2 in the process.
It's a shame because I think he did drive a good race, especially managing his tires in the wet.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just a mistake from him. Really, I think the team should have just told him this is what we're doing instead of giving him options.
Yeah.
Just because for him, there's, I'm sure, a lot going on. He's probably pushing real hard on, like, his in-lap. They should have just been like, all right, we're pitting for mediums and not give him the options of we could pit for softs or mediums, whatever. And then I think it's just too many things for him as a driver. There's a lot of stuff going on, and then I think they should have just like told them what they were gonna do. Then I think they might have had a better shot at going after Hamilton.
Definitely.
Or at least covering Verstappen, if nothing else.
Yes.
So then the race result, good result for Hamilton. I realized we didn't talk about him that much. He did drive a good race, managing his tires well, especially in that the last stint on softs. But you know, I mean, I think it was a well-driven race, a well-deserved win for Hamilton, and good to see him, I guess, back on that top step of the podium.
Definitely. I mean, and that also marks win number 9 at Silverstone, which is the most a driver has won at any track in F1.
At one single track.
Yeah.
So pretty monumental, I suppose, for him.
Yes.
And then, again, Norris down to P3. I think he could have preserved the P2 with the mediums, but at the end of the day, it is what it is for him, I suppose.
Verstappen had a good drive going from P4 to P2. So
yeah, Haas picked up some really good points with Nico Hülkenberg in P6.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, Sainz did finish ahead of him, but still, that's a Ferrari customer team.
Yeah.
And they're really using that Ferrari engine well, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, also Hülkenberg, just really good driver. I mean, he's definitely been one of the top. Well, I'd say upper drivers this season, and I think that was a good pickup by Audi to grab him for his team.
Yeah, and then also Aston Martin picking up some points for their team, so good for them. 8th and 9th. Or sorry, 7th and 8th.
And then 9th place, we see Alex Albon picking up 2 points for Williams, so pretty good for them.
Logan Sargent right on the brink of points in P11.
Yeah.
He was like 10 seconds behind Tsunoda, so he wasn't necessarily close to the points, but still, he drove a good race for what that car is.
Yeah.
And he managed his tires, and especially during the wet phase of the race, I think he did a good job.
As a Logan Sargent fan, I want to see him in the top 10 eventually this season.
I would hope so. But also Tsunoda picking up points for VCARB in P10, so only 1 point, but that's something for them.
Yep.
Fighting for those lower point positions in the constructors, but those positions mean more money for next season. So.
I mean, yeah, and those are, as of now, all up for grabs too.
Yeah, definitely. Ocon and Gasly. This is a race to forget for Alpine.
Yep.
As many of them have been so far, but Ocon 16 and Gasly, of course, didn't start the race, so not a good race for Alpine. Really, like we've said before, they just need more work developing their car to make it a good race car, I think, because really at this point they just don't have one.
Nope.
So yeah, I think that finishes up the race pretty much.
Yeah.
I'd say it was entertaining to watch, pretty exciting.
I think definitely, when the rain threw a wrench in the race, I feel like it got way more exciting.
Yeah. So I think we'll move on to some news now.
Yes.
So one of the first things, a lot of these I realized relate to Audi, which is kind of funny. But so Audi said that Mattia Binotto is going to lead their F1 project. So I don't know exactly what that'll mean. He's not the team principal.
No.
I know. Of course, Binotto is the former Ferrari team principal before Fred Vasseur. So he is going to be with Audi for their project. What exactly his role will be, I'm not sure yet. But definitely an interesting move, as we know that, I mean, he's not been the best with Ferrari.
Yeah, we've seen how Ferrari's been. So, interesting move by them. But let's see how it does play out in their ultimate plan.
Yeah. And we'll see if anything happens, like, with Ferrari to Audi. Hopefully for their sake, no. So, yeah, and then also another move to Audi is Jonathan Wheatley, who was the Red Bull sporting director. He's going to leave and become the team principal of Audi. So that's interesting that Red Bull seems to be losing people, which you would not think from a team like Red Bull that has a lot of support and things like that.
As you know, like Adrian Newey has left as well.
Yeah.
So we see a bunch of Red Bull employees also leaving.
Yeah, which is interesting. Again, like it seems like clearly Red Bull is kind of starting to fall off their high horse there.
Which was sooner rather than I thought. I mean, I thought it'd be much later. I thought they would dominate a little bit more.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with... I feel like that's one of those things with the rules changing every 4 years.
Yeah.
It kind of... Once the other teams start to catch up, it makes it... Those, like, last 2 seasons of the regulations are very exciting, I feel like. We watched that in 2021. Somewhat. It wasn't on the same level as this season is. But, you know, you look at, like, earlier seasons, like 2023, 2022, it was, like, Red Bull dominance, right?
Yes.
If you look at previous years, we see, like, Mercedes dominance, right? In, like, 2018, 2019, 2020 even, like, Mercedes dominance. Now, we're starting to see that Red Bull is not necessarily the dominant team. There's other teams like McLaren and Ferrari sometimes. And Mercedes, they're coming in here and they're challenging.
Yes.
And they've built good cars this season. But then the thing is, in 2026, the rules are going to change. Someone else will be dominant. You know? That's the thing is that by changing the rules every 4 years, it can make it exciting, and it's interesting to see like the new era of cars. However, it means that the competition isn't always as good.
Yes, I mean, it also favored... I mean, the rule changes also favor different teams as well. We've seen before that there's previous rule changes favored Red Bull more, and we see that these other teams have figured that out, and now that these new regulations are coming, not everyone's also happy with them either, which I don't think anybody really is ever happy with the rule changes that come, but it is, I mean, we will get to see what will happen in 2026. I think it'll be really interesting to see.
Yeah. And then another team principal news is Alpine have announced a brand new team principal.
Yes.
Oliver Oakes, who is currently the high-tech Grand Prix team principal. So they race in Formula 2 and Formula 3. So Bruno Famin is out of Alpine. I'm not really surprised, as we've seen Alpine's performance has really dropped off. Especially even from previous seasons where it hasn't necessarily been the best, but it's been better than this season.
Yeah.
So I think that's really something that Alpine will have to kind of sort out. What they're gonna do. Obviously, we saw at the beginning of the season they lost a lot of people. They still seem to not be totally stable.
No.
So that's another one of those things that they'll just have to.
Which I feel like two teams that did do that, Alpine and Haas, we saw both overhaul. But we see Haas really taking advantage and growing, while Alpine was on the other side of that and falling. So it's really interesting to see how that happens.
And the big news recently,
yes.
Carlos Sainz finally makes the call. He joins Williams Racing for sure 2025 and 2026.
Yes, he did sign a 2-year contract.
Yeah, so possibly, of course, it might go on. We shall see. But it's kind of an interesting move for Carlos Sainz.
Because the fact that the Williams performance hasn't been great at all these past few years.
But at the same time, it's like he might not have any other choice.
Yeah,
you know?
I think he was holding out for a Mercedes contract, which I don't think he received, which I think they're just going out to get Kimi.
Yeah, or they didn't want to give him a long contract. I think he probably wants to be somewhere stable that he knows he can stay. And if Mercedes is offering him like a 1-year contract, he might not want to take that deal.
Yeah.
Just because he wants to be, I think, locked in for his future. And if he's not, I think that's probably a deal breaker. I would think it would be a deal breaker. So we'll see what ends up happening for him. I would hope for his sake that it ends up being good, that Williams can figure it out, as well as for Alex Albon, because I think they really do have a good driver pairing now.
Yeah.
With Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz, they definitely have a good set of drivers. I think they just need to have a good car as well.
Well, as of now, I don't see anything happening to Williams to get that better car, but we do see that nice driver pairing though.
Yeah. So that should help them, if nothing else. So hopefully for them, it'll be good. For Williams, at least. And then we do see some upgrades coming before Hungary for round 13. Red Bull made some interesting upgrades that I noticed you can really see, actually, when you watch. Red Bull has... they've removed for Max's car, only Max's car so far. They've removed the big shoulders that you could see on the Red Bull car. They've gotten rid of those over the engine cover. They've removed them from Max's car, but they're still on Checo's car.
Okay.
So this is interesting, I think. It really shows that Red Bull is trying new things. They're trying to do something to help them out. And it's a pretty big design change, I think. It's pretty significant, yeah. Especially it's very visible. Some of these these upgrades are not very visible. So that's very interesting to see.
I mean, they really need to try everything they can because they seem to be losing their grip on the grid right now.
Yeah. And then I think we also have some other news. I forgot that Renault or Alpine, I suppose now, maybe stopping their engine program.
Oh, okay.
I think they're trying to work out a Mercedes deal actually for 2026, I believe, when the new regulations come out.
Okay.
So that will be very interesting to see. I think it really shows that they're kind of done developing an engine. I'm sure it's very costly, but it shows that also that Alpine sort of may be losing some faith in their Formula 1 program.
Yeah.
We saw Renault earlier in this season kind of threatening to pull the plug on the project. Now this sort of seems like they're kind of gearing up to do that again, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that the Alpine's performance is not good at all. And if you're looking at an investor standpoint, it's not a good look for them as well.
Yeah. And then another thing I want to touch on is the differences that we've seen in the Constructors' Championship. So after this race, it's actually very interesting to look at this. So Red Bull is still on top.
Yeah.
As we expected, not surprised there. But Mercedes has actually fallen down a lot. They've gone from essentially second after 12 rounds to fourth.
Yeah.
So, clearly we've seen a recent increase in their car and their performance. But still, they're really not where they were even last season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen because Mercedes has struggled at the beginning of the season, this season especially, but we've only seen now, like in these last maybe 2 races, that Mercedes has picked it up again. Yeah. So maybe like towards the end of the season, we'll see that Mercedes will climb up again.
Yeah.
And I definitely see Ferrari dropping because they're right now in P2 in the Constructors. I'll see McLaren P2 and I think maybe Mercedes P3 if Ferrari doesn't bring any upgrades at all, which I highly doubt. I think they will bring something in.
And then Aston Martin, of course, also has dropped a lot from P3 in the championship to P5. I think, of course, we've seen that. We've talked about that a lot. But that's definitely not good for them, as they were doing so well last year, and now it's a little sad.
Something that's interesting though, AlphaTauri from last year was last, and now RB is not last. I mean, they're in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, they're in 6th place. Yeah, and, I mean, that's really, really good. It shows the work that those 2 drivers have been doing.
Yeah.
Yuki Tsunoda has been, for the most part, outperforming his teammate, but still, either way. There really is a big jump for AlphaTauri as a team. I suppose RB now, but they've really come a long way from last year, where they were definitely a back of the grid team. Yeah. And in previous seasons, they hadn't been that way. Looking at like seasons like 2021, they had a couple good results. Yeah. They weren't like the best. They weren't like Mercedes or Ferrari or Red Bull type of teams, but they were not terrible.
They were not.
And this year they're starting to look better. Still not great. They're not the best team, but they're starting to fight for points more often, which is definitely a good improvement for them. But to go more in depth into the matchup of those 2 drivers, of Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda, they are close in terms of their performances, but Yuki does seem to be doing a bit better.
A little bit better.
So we see Yuki has been outperforming Ricciardo 7 to 5 times in races and 9 to 5 in qualifying. So this is after 14 races, so I know, again, we're a bit behind. But still, either way, you can take this, you can tell from this that really there is a big gap still, I think, in performance between the 2 drivers.
Yeah.
In terms of points, I mean, it's a big difference. Yuki has 22 points versus Ricciardo's 12.
Yep.
So again, that's really what matters the most.
Is how many points you can generate for your team.
Yeah, and so Ricciardo hasn't been getting as many, which is why I feel like it's a little silly that there's a lot of talks about Ricciardo going to Red Bull and not Tsunoda. I know, of course, Ricciardo has experience in that Red Bull car. Of course, it's different now with this set of regulations. But still, at the same time, like, I don't know that Ricciardo deserves the seat as much as Yuki does.
Yes, but the thing is, Yuki is a person that will fight Max.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is what Red Bull wants.
Yeah.
I think they just want Max to be like the guy, just the one guy that's there, and then maybe the teammate is just someone who could support Max, which I don't think Yuki will support Max. Okay? He will be fighting for his own.
But at the same time, I mean, we've seen Ricciardo and Max have had plenty of run-ins in the past when they were still together as teammates.
But
so will the driver pairing be any better?
Well, I feel like it will be better because Ricciardo has diminished over the years. We've seen
that.
So true. I don't think he will pose as much as a threat as he did in his younger days. So I think that's maybe why the talks are fueled so much. And as you said, the experience also matters because they've been teammates before.
Yeah. So I think that wraps it up for us today.
Yes.
It was a great race to watch, and we'll catch you for the next one.
Goodbye.